Hi, and welcome to On and Off, our podcast covering the on-premise and off-premise beverage alcohol industry. I'm Melissa Dowling, editor of Cheers.
And I'm Kyle Swartz, editor of Beverage Dynamics magazine. Today we're talking with Tom Slattery, owner of JJ's Wine, Spirits, and Cigars, a top 100 beverage alcohol retailer located in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We wanted to talk with Tom about the current state of the off-premise alcohol industry and how he incorporates a bar into his business. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. And let's jump right in here. So JJ's combines traditional retail with an in-store bar concept, which is a concept I'm an enormous fan of. Can I ask you what inspired that model and how has it changed the customer experience compared to, say, a standard liquor store?
Sure. So when we've been around for almost 30 years. So we opened our original bottle shop in 1998,
Mm.
and our I was the original manager for the store, and when I bought it in 2011, I incorporated my own our own, I should say, philosophy of guest experience to with the core principle being making people feel comfortable in the spaces that we occupy. And so, as we evolved and, grew and our neighborhood grew and, we were seeing kind of a need to expand outside of our, then current footprint. This is back in 2016, 2017. And, we started looking at other options and, part of our growing business at that point in time was experience management and event management. And we couldn't really do it to the extent that we wanted to or knew that we could unless we had an on-sale license attached with it. So we started looking at development models and areas of development within our community that were it had to follow some criteria. It had to be within a half a mile of our existing location, so we didn't lose our current neighborhood client base. It had to be, previously undeveloped property. We didn't want to go into an existing building. We knew we wanted to do new construction because it was going to be a very unique concept, and and we wanted to be in proximity to access points. So we wanted to have, we wanted to be really easy to get to from basically any part of the city. And so we settled on this property where we are right now, because for one, it checked all the boxes. For two, it gave us a lot of flexibility because it's a development on about 4.5 acres that gave us some extreme flexibility on what we could build. And our original plan was we didn't have an on sale plan at that point in time until a license became available. And we can talk about that a little bit later when we talk about what it takes to do this. But one did become available and through the development network that we were working with. So we took advantage of the opportunity to acquire the licensing asset because we knew that from our experience in event management side of things, it would take us to a whole nother level because then we wouldn't just be going into off-campus events and serving drinks. We would be able to go into off-campus events and sell drinks. So in doing that, you have to have, in order to be able to do it the way that we do it, you have to have the on-sale license, which gives us the ability to license off campus. But if you're going to have the on-sale license, then why not build a bar? So our original footprint for this building was about 8,200 square feet. And, it incorporated, bigger and bolder retail concepts, that kind of stuff. And when we decided to build the bar, we expanded that footprint to about 10,000 square feet and built the bar and, a few other amenities to host on-site events and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So it was a mechanism that was developed out of what we saw as a need to be able to deliver our services off campus, but then it just evolved into what we are today, 8 years later. So,
Right. I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, what the biggest challenge is that liquor stores are facing this year, but also since you have the on-premise perspective as well, I would ask the same about, what some of the challenges that bars and restaurants are facing, from the competition, the changing consumer habits, rise of THC, inflation, tariffs. I could go on, but you know.
Everything. I mean, that is, I mean, that's the answer is all of it, all of the above. You know, what we've seen, you know, we're not isolated in, you know, in what has happened in the last couple of years. And it all kind of started post-pandemic when, you know, the majority of the population realized we've been holed up for 18 months. Now we want to get out, we want to explore. And there was kind of an influx. You know, we obviously did really well retail wise during the pandemic, but it wasn't enough to really kind of um, you know, take care of business in what we developed here. I mean, this concept that we built here was entirely based on people being able to get together, gather, and as well as our offsite, you know, event and experience management. It was all about getting together and you know, and enjoying the space together. Well, we couldn't do that during the pandemic, so we were isolated retail, which obviously did really well along with other, you know, alcohol retailers. So when we what we saw after the fact, so what we did in the bar during that period of time was we did a lot of carry out. We did a lot of grab and go. We leaned into food, which we one of the concepts that we developed when we built this business was called the Boozy Bakery, which was my wife's element to the business concept. Whereas it, you know, not a necessarily a bakery that makes desserts with alcohol, but a bakery that's built inside a liquor store and a bar. And so it we utilize that concept to kind of keep people engaged during the pandemic. And with that, we kind of leaned into food with, you know, pick up, carry out, you know, pre-ordered stuff, grab and go, that kind of thing. And what that kind of led to was me hiring a culinary team of two that once I hired them to help us kind of facilitate all of that carry out element, we just had some great conversations about food, about what we could do differently in our bar to kind of elevate the experience once we did get back open and get back to normal. So back in, you know, mid part of 2020, when you still saw a lot of contraction of business, we expanded and started, you know, doing more on-premise food stuff. So we became a bar that sold really good food. And people walk in my store on a regular basis and say, "Where's your restaurant at?" And I just answer them point blank, "We don't have a restaurant. We have a bar that does really good food along with drinks, cocktails, and that kind of stuff." So the the challenge with the bar that we had that we had moving past the pandemic was getting more and more people interested in that component of it. And we had some success with that, you know, early on, you know, that kind of tapered off. Sioux Falls has roughly 900 places where you can eat and drink in a town of, you know, roughly, you know, with the surrounding areas of about 300,000 people. That's a lot. So that's one of the challenges that we face within this on-premise element. And but we're able to kind of, you know, tie it together with our retail concept to create a level of balance. And then what we've seen in the last 2 years is we've seen that drastic drop, you know, which is a national trend, I believe, in people drinking, you know, retail liquor, you know, switching to alternative beverages, lifestyle choices, that kind of stuff, THC beverages. And, you know, so it's really forced us to, you know, take our service elements, you know, on premise up a couple more notches, which we've deployed in the last, you know, year or so. Um, while we're still trying to figure out where this is going to end on the retail side of it, because we've seen, you know, double digit negative growth, you know, for about, I would say, at least 8 quarters now. And I
Yeah.
don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of people have seen that. So it's a combination of inflation. It's a combination of, you know, political wariness. It's a combination of economic conditions. And I think and also the fact that the people coming of age came of age, you know, they grew up during that pandemic period and became more glued to doing what we're doing now, which is the, you know, digital interaction. And they just, you know, people who are in that 21 to 28-year-old demographic right now, they don't they don't drink as much as they used to, say, 10, 15 years ago. And there's less of them. There was a distinct population decline back in the, late aughts and early teens that has led to, just less people coming of age into the
Yeah.
market that we're trying to get our, grips into from a marketing perspective. But then we also know another part of this, quadruple edged sword is that they aren't loyal, they aren't engaged. It's really hard to get their attention, when it comes to new products and that kind of stuff. And then again, there's the, product innovation component where, every producer, every distributor, every wholesaler is coming out with the new latest and greatest thing that we have to have. And I mean, that in itself is probably one of the biggest challenges that we face, is how do we maintain and continue to bring in all that they're producing, and they're bringing, particularly in the RTD category, because it's a lot. It's a lot. So lots of
Absolutely.
different challenges that we face, and, and so we're constantly battling it. But ultimately, our core principle takes effect is how do we make people feel comfortable in our space, whether it's in our bar, in our retail environment, or offsite at some of the events that we manage.
Yeah, and you've been kind of hinting at it the whole time. The next question I was about to ask you is how would you describe the current buying habits in our post-pandemic environment?
Yeah, it's all over the place. It's what we leaned into THC a couple of years ago because we did see some teeth there. We're a little concerned about what's going to happen in November if they don't get
Yeah,
it fixed, because everybody knows that we have a moratorium on the complete ban until November. I think it's November 13th.
correct.
A whole week, 8 days after the next, midterm election.
Yeah,
So it doesn't give them a whole lot of time to fix it. But that's the hope, is that they're going to fix it in the federal level, or take THC in general off of that class one narcotics list, so that it opens it up for more control, more taxation, that kind of stuff, which I think there needs to be, because it's kind of the Wild West when it comes to hemp-based THC right now, because we can sell anything. We're careful about what we curate and what we put in, because there's a lot of just weird products, and then most of them are probably going to go away because they're just not going to have some longevity. But so the buying habits have changed to people experimenting. Funny side note, our biggest demographic with THC beverages is probably people my age, so
yeah,
55 to 70 years old. And what they're seeing with them, I mean, they still have the disposable income to afford them because they're not cheap. What they're seeing with them is the health benefits, the sleep aids, pain management, all that kind of stuff. I mean, people are really getting some benefit. So we've seen a lot of those folks switching from alcohol to THC beverages because they are seeing bona fide health beverages. So I have a concern for them become reliant on this for quality of life. If it does go away, it's going to cause a problem. As far as alcohol is concerned, I mean, there's definitely our biggest downtrend is in wine, so getting more people interested in wine has become a problem. So we do have some engagement tools. We'll talk about that a little bit later, and what we're doing to try and, at least maintain our dominance in the wine sector in this market, because we are the number one wine retailer in Sioux Falls. And the reason for that is because we still focus on the high end. We still focus on curating products that offer value and quality. We don't just throw everything on the wall or everything on the floor and hope that we're going to scratch some sales out of it. So we're very careful. My team's done a really good job of making sure that we have the right things for the right mix of people that are still interested in purchasing. Craft beer has taken probably one of the biggest hits, because a lot of people drinking craft beer have switched to the THC. So we've kind of supplanted that revenue stream to a degree, but I think that we're going to see a continuing decline in that because of a variety of reasons. Um, Spirits still hold strong. I mean, the growth that we experienced in spirits over the last 10 years is people focused on brown spirits, primarily, and bourbon, what have you. We're seeing it kind of taper off as far as the growth, but it's still probably, I would say, 40% of our spirits or our adult beverage sales are still in that, brown spirits category, as well as our inventory values, which again, is an escalating factor when it comes to how we manage the money. So challenges, yeah, I mean they're all over the place.
You got them.
Yeah.
So JJ's Bar has a whiskey focus, is that right?
We have a craft focus. So we have a craft and service focus. When we first opened, we wanted to be known as a whiskey bar. As you can see behind me, it's a wall of whiskey. We have about 700 open bottles, which is the largest number of bottles in, in a very large area when you factor, size and population, all that kind of stuff. And we did this, so for one, it looks good. For two, it gives people options when they come in, and it does emphasize our focus on the brown spirits component of it. But really our focus in JJ's Bar is the service element and making people feel comfortable in that space. So providing, consistent evolution of, seasonal cocktails, utilizing single barrel spirits in most of our drinks, so adding some uniqueness to it to give people that different experience when they come in and every time they come
Well, let's talk a little bit about experience because experiential retail is a big buzzword, but also the guest experience and the on-premise. I mean, what what actually works when it comes to events or tastings or education or just creating reasons for customers to either spend more time in the store or at the bar?
Sure. Yeah. So features, happy hours, that kind of stuff, that those are, kind of the elements that, draw people's attention, bring them in. Live music, we do regularly in our bar. We're kicking off we do a summer music series called Whiskey Wednesday Live, starting first week of June. We run it through the whole entirety of the summer, where we have a weekly Whiskey Wednesday program, that exposes people to different styles of whiskeys and, new things on the market, that kind of stuff. And then also gives them opportunity to purchase allocated bottles. So that's one of the big on off premise tie-ins that we have, is that Whiskey Wednesday program. We started this Whiskey Wednesday live program last year where we incorporated live music into it. So once all of the Whiskey Wednesday festivities were done, music kicks off and it keeps people in their seats longer, hopefully drinking more, eating more, and, spending more. And it's had some success. People really like live music here. We've got a really good platform for it. We're not large by any stretch. So, we can't pack a ton of people in here until we can get our patio open. Once our patio is open, it expands our seating by about 70 to 80 people. It on a night when it's not 90 degrees and, 99% humidity, it gets pretty magical in here.
Mm.
That's wonderful. Experiential is so important right now. I kind of
It
feel like
is.
that's the word of the year in terms of beverage alcohol retailers. You got to find those unique ways to bring people in.
Yeah, and it's been our word, as following that core principle of comfort, experience, hospitality, service
Mm.
have always been, part of what we do, even when we were back in our old bottle shop and it was just people coming in, going up to the sampling bar, tasting something, buying a bottle, buying a case, buying 10 cases. We want to make sure that everybody in every element of our business is getting the same level of experiential treatment. And so we've always done that. I know it's a buzzword now, and I know it's trendy. The customer experience. There's, podcasts like crazy where you can go out and listen to what different people are doing, but we've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
So, it's just been part of what we do, is creating that experience for people, in every aspect, including our, event platform. People see us roll up to, a concert or a wedding, they know that the experiential component to that event is not just going to be, some guy standing behind a table pouring wine. It's going to be a team of adult beverage professionals that are crafting cocktails and, curating beverages and, getting them out to the masses to improve that experience level in that capacity.
Yeah.
So it all kind of circles around that core concept of making people feel comfortable in the space that we occupy.
Yeah. And while you're answering the question before, you said the phrase allocated whiskey, and Melissa will be shocked to know that my ears went up when you said that. You know, one of the things I like about stores that have back bars is that you can just put the allocated bottles there and just be like, here, there you go. Everybody gets a chance. And I was wondering whether that was something you did.
We when the allocations were still not terrible, for lack of a better word, we were trying to split the allocated bottles between on and off premise. I mean, there was a push by Sazerac a few years ago. I say it was about 10 years ago to push more bottles to on premise because they wanted people to experience the bottles. But then some of those on premise retailers were just turn around and flip them on the open market. So they kind of switched that paradigm back to retail. So a lot of the allocations are based on retail um, production now and what we're able to do with those certain key markers. And as things start to open up and as more barrels are being laid down and as there's more high quality well aged whiskeys hitting the market, because we know what some of these producers are doing in order to increase their production on some of that stuff. We're going to get back to what it was 15, 20 years ago when the Van Winkles, the Blantons, and the Wellers of the world were just sitting on the shelf collecting dust. And I look forward to getting back to there because I want to get back to selling whiskey, not allocating it, and it was always a joy to, find somebody that special bottle as they're sitting there perusing the stacks rather than, having to figure out these engagement tools in order to give somebody an opportunity to purchase one. I think we do it very well and we do a very balanced approach to it to give everybody an opportunity to get some of those fun things, but it all requires engagement and continuing to provide them something outside of just a liquor store experience, a standard liquor store experience.
I think Kyle's planning a trip to Sioux Falls to get at some of those bottles.
Yeah, and my guys do a pretty good job of, when we do get allocated. I really hate the word. Allocated innovation are my two least favorite words in our industry. And my guys do a really good job of kind of squirreling bottles away so that we always have a consistent supply of those and get of what we call engagement material. So if Kyle were to pop in, I might be able to take him back to the cabinet and find something fun back there.
That's very
Don't say
kind of you,
that.
Tom.
You don't
I was
know what
going to
you're
say,
doing.
I was also going to say, Melissa, you think I can't get these bottles through back channels here in Connecticut? I think I got to go down
I think
to.
you probably got a few connections.
I'll have my producer cut that part out.
Yeah, the wholesale realm here is it's not unique. We're a three-tier system. We're losing our NDC of South Dakota. They just recently sold out to
Yeah.
Quality Beverage, which is based out of West River. And their inventory, they've been our longest standing wholesale relationship for the 30 years that I've been doing this. And they, it's you've seen the writing on the walls the last 2 years, as more and more brands have exited their warehouse and moved over to Johnson Brothers, Southern Glazer Wine and Spirits, and some of the smaller purveyors that we work with. Um, but as things start to consolidate in fewer warehouses, now it's getting even more complicated from a wholesale perspective, especially with this dip in sales,
Mm.
because we kind of know that the allocated back to that component to the business is going to go away at some point in time. It probably is the right time to do it now as there's this, reduction in retail sales, but I think that there's still some games being played on the producer wholesale side of things that are still kind of creating that demand for the product. And by minimizing the supply going out to markets like ours, still looking for those key markers on, key items that they want to sell because they're making a lot of money on it. And that a lot of that's RTDs now, which is where that innovation bad word comes into play.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about some of the more challenging categories for you. What are some of the categories that are doing well right now for you?
THC is doing well. We continue to grow, and there's a good turn of product. Brown spirits still do really well. I would say those are our top performing categories. The struggles, we sell a lot of RTDs, but there's a lot of RTDs that we have to stock on our shelves because everybody has one, everybody's producing one because they're really cheap to make. And anybody can put, take basically the same product, put, label on it, 5 times over, and I immediately have 5 new products instead of just one new product, which is what it was 10 years ago. So I would say the most challenging element is that RTD sector because there's constantly something new coming, and we have to constantly find shelf stretchers in order to make room for them because that combined with social media buzz and creative marketing strategies and that kind of thing, and everybody trying to find what is going to make that 21 to 28-year-old demographic tick is causing a lot of, inventory stagnation that, across the board. We're moving, certain products fairly well, but other ones, the new thing, I mean, let's put it this way. Sazerac has, I think, 220 new products being launched in 2026. That was the number that I heard. And then that's nationwide. I don't know how many of those are going to hit our, market, but we're probably predicting to see growth in that RTD category by about, I would say, 60 to 70 new brands and variations of brands over the next, over the remainder of this year.
The
That's a
same.
lot. And they're premium products. So it's not like you can, it's not like they're premium products and it's all cash and carry. So it's not like you can, with beer, if we don't sell something, they take it back. With RTD, since it's all spirits based, once we buy it, we own it, and so if
Yeah.
we're not moving it, we got to discount it, close it out, sell it in the bar, which we do, on occasion. We don't do RTDs in our bar because we are a craft cocktail bar. So anything that we make comes from scratch. But, so we don't necessarily have that outlet. We do use some RTD stuff in some of our offsite event just because it's easier to produce and or easier to deploy without having to set up an entire bar. But that, I would say, that category itself is probably the most challenging right now because of the push by wholesale and supplier to bring in everything that they got.
Yeah, and you talked about Sazerac launching a bunch of new products. I was going to say, to say nothing of all the RTD brands that they've also bought in the last
Oh
three or
yeah,
4 years. They are on a buying spree of RTD brands.
they are in a buying spree of a lot of things. I mean,
Yeah.
it I was talking to our state rep a couple of weeks ago and is here visiting, and his head is, just exploding with how to, you know manage and continue to. I mean, they're just as frustrated as we are, the boots on the ground, because the guys in the corporate office are just seeing strategy, strategy, strategy on how to get more of these, grain neutral spirit based products out into the market because it's so cheap to make. And I mean, the amount of money that they're making on these things is insane compared to what, we're still, riding 22, 23% profit margin on things that they're probably making, 70, 80%. So
Absolutely.
Mm.
I had a quick THC question as well. Do you guys have a
sure.
milligram cap in your state?
We don't have it, no, because we're the Wild West,
Okay.
so there are no rules when it comes to THC right now. So occasionally I'll get, some of these, little pop-up distributors will pop in and they'll drop a 50 milligram can
Yeah.
or a 100 milligram can on
Yeah.
my desk or on my ops manager's desk. And we'll both look at each other and it's like, you're kidding, right? It's like, this is the most, so we put our own internal, kind of plat plateau at 10 milligrams.
Yeah.
We're leaning heavily into more of the 5 milligram offerings that are coming out. What you can't control is what people do with one of the spirits bottles once they go out the door. And so a lot of it's just education, teaching people, right portion control. I mean, it's
Yeah.
still a drug, and so we want to make sure people know that it's still a drug. It's not a regulated drug, but it's going to be. So I think that as they hopefully flesh out some of the, because you can't just take away a $40 billion industry, and that's what it's turned into in a very short period of time. So it needs to be controlled, it needs to be taxed, it needs to be wholesale driven, probably. I hate to put it into a three-tier network, but it's going to become a commodity product, just like, our beer categories and that kind of stuff. And so along with that is going to come a little more regulation and a little more, um, accountability as far as what people are putting out there.
Yeah, and that's my take on the THC category as well in terms of the looming deadline is it's just too much money being made for it to go away. I think at the
Yeah.
end the money will win. And I also agree with you. And obviously state by state have different milligram caps. Some states have caps, some states do not, like yours. And I hear a lot in the states that do not have caps. The store is just imposing their own caps, which I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know there's people out there who like the 50 and 100 milligram product, which is fine. And I know retailers who sell it and sell a lot of it, but like you said, the fear is the person who doesn't understand the difference between 10
Yeah.
milligrams and 50 milligrams and is now high for 14 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And we like, even in our bar, we do some THC cocktails in the
Mm,
bar, and we also do some of the cans, but we do have a cap of 20 milligrams per customer per visit. So if
Good.
somebody comes in and they want to sit, they want to, one guy's this guy's drinking Bud Light, this guy's drinking Old Fashions, this guy's drinking THC bevies, the cap is, 4 5 milligram cans or 2 10 milligram cans. And we won't sell any more than that because they will be sleeping on the bar before they leave.
Yes.
Yeah. And we witnessed it early on, and that's when I said, no, this isn't going to happen. So there's some places in town that don't even start selling THC beverages until later at night
Hmm.
because they don't want people starting early with that particular beverage and then end up passed out in the bathroom. So,
Or taking up bar stools.
or taking up bar stools because they just can't move. Yeah.
So I think we have time for just one more. I would say, what is one piece of advice that you would give independent retailers or bars about um, staying competitive and relevant in today's the beverage alcohol landscape?
Yeah, hire good people. Have a good team that's trained in the products that you sell, that understand and that actually buys into whatever it is that your core philosophy is. Ours is all about the guest experience. And we, from part-time college students that work for us on the retail side and as servers and bartenders in our bar, we really try to teach them that cultural component and we pay well, and I think that that's an important thing. So advice that I would give is find that that point within your budget with respect to your people to make sure that they're taken care of so that they can focus on the guest experience more than on making the money, if that makes sense. And it's costly. We're in an industry that that is really being hammered by higher wages and that kind of stuff, and it really does impact the bottom line to a large degree. But you got to have the good people in order to make those experience level things happen. Um, as far as there's a one of my competitors that has been kind of a side by side competitor for 28 years, just announced this morning or yesterday to me personally that they were selling their business to
Hmm.
to a gas station chain. And so with that, we were the last two independently owned single standing stores in the city of Sioux Falls. So that
Right.
makes us the last single standing mom and pop liquor shop in our community. And if anybody has any kind of longevity in their market or has any kind of connection to the historical perspective of where their business came from and how it started, utilize that as a marketing tool because I mean, people do respond to that kind of connectivity within the community, and as long as if it's tied to community-based events, like a lot of the stuff that we do, it's a really good way to secure market presence moving forward in spite of, continued growth of, you can, again, we're the Wild West, so you can buy, beverage alcohol pretty much every gas station, grocery store, um, convenience store, across the city. So it's all about creating those experiential components and making sure that you maintain that through your people and through communication to your customer base.
Hmm.
That would be the advice, and have a lot of money in the bank.
That always helps, doesn't it?
It does, and we don't, and so we're constantly, trying to, figure out different ways to fund some of the acquisitions that we have to make when it comes to like single barrels. And I
Hmm.
got 8 single barrels that just decided to pop up here in the last 6 weeks that we picked out
Hmm.
back in January. And there was a period of back when we were, during the single barrel heydays, which was probably about 10 years ago. We were getting them, we'd get them, they'd sell out. We get them, they sell out. Now it's a little more stagnant. So when you get 8 barrels and, roughly, $100,000 worth of whiskey show up all at once, it gets to be a little bit of a challenge on the bank
Yeah.
account. So again, it's another changing component to the business where we did used to sell those out pretty regularly. And now so we curate special barrels. We got one being released today that we're pretty excited about. Um, but it still presents a pretty big challenge. So having a good credit line and a good bank to work with, that'd be the other piece of advice I give.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again, Tom, for joining us today.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I like
Absolutely.
talking through a lot of this because it kind of gives me a little bit of a good understanding of me internally about what that we are on the right path, that we are doing the things I think, the right way to continue our longevity. I mean, getting past that 30-year mark and moving into the next decade of our existence is going to be a huge benchmark for us. And I think, that all of these things that we're doing and being able to talk through it and it gives me that realization that we're doing the right thing. So, and I
Absolutely.
wish everybody luck. I wish anybody who's challenged, who knows what, trying to move through this, quagmire of complication right now, with all things that we talked about. I mean, it's a lot on independent stores, and I wish everybody out there luck.
Yeah, we wish you the best of luck as well. And
Appreciate it.
thank you to everybody out there for listening to another episode of On and Off. Please do join us next time when we'll talk about yet another fascinating topic that spans the retail and restaurant worlds. Until then, cheers.
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 If you enjoyed the On and Off podcast, please hit the subscribe button. Also, you can find more great content at cheersonline.com and beveragedynamics.com, including recipes, product reviews, and interviews with the movers and shakers of the beverage alcohol industry. You can also sign up for our free weekly e-newsletters for both publications on our websites. Cheers!